In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. A galaxy consumed by endless conflict, where faith has replaced reason, and the light of hope was extinguished long ago. Humanity, broken and bound by the will of an immortal emperor, fights not for freedom, but for survival. The warp seethes with madness, chaos gods feast on souls, and every star burns with the screams of the dying. But then, something impossible happens. A tear opens in the void, a fracture between realities. And through it descends a figure wrapped in light, his red cape fluttering against the blackness of space. He is not a god, not a demon, but something far beyond both. A man born under a yellow sun. A symbol of hope from another universe. They call him Superman. His arrival changes everything. To some, he is a savior. To others, a heretic. To the Imperium, a threat. To chaos, a challenge. His ideals, truth, justice, compassion, stand against the cold machinery of the Imperium. The void of space trembled as reality itself tore apart. In the endless expanse of the Imperium, where time had no meaning and thoughts could take form, a blinding light erupted, something pure, something alien to this forsaken realm. The warp, a domain ruled by chaos, screamed as an anomaly appeared within it. Through the rift emerged a figure, his body bathed in radiant energy, his cape fluttering like a banner of defiance. It was Kal-El of Krypton, known to humanity as Superman. He had been chasing an unstable energy surge near the edges of his universe, attempting to prevent a catastrophic collapse in a collapsing star system. But the energies he encountered were beyond comprehension. The surge tore open the veil between realities and hurled him into a place far removed from anything he had ever known. The moment he emerged, the stars themselves looked wrong. The galaxies were dimmer, the void heavier, filled with the weight of countless wars and unending death. The very air of this universe carried despair. As Superman floated above a dead world, he sensed no life, no heartbeat, only the faint echoes of destruction. His super hearing picked up the cries of souls from light years away, entire planets screaming in pain through the warp currents. It wasn't mere sound, it was emotion, madness bleeding through the fabric of space. His mind, though strong, wavered as he felt the influence of the warp brushing against his thoughts, whispering his fears back at him. For a moment, even Superman felt small, but he refused to yield. His instincts guided him toward the nearest signs of civilization. Activating his supervision, he gazed across millions of kilometers and found a fleet of ships locked in battle. Massive Gothic warships, each a cathedral of steel and fire, exchanged devastating salvos of plasma and macro cannon rounds. Between them drifted wreckage, corpses, and the silent prayers of doomed soldiers. Without hesitation, Superman surged forward faster than light, breaking through the void like a comet of hope. As he reached the battlefield, his presence did not go unnoticed. The Imperial Navy's Auspex scanners went haywire. Alarms blared as captains demanded identification of the unknown contact. To them, anything unknown was heresy. But before orders could be given to fire, the Chaos Fleet on the other side unleashed another barrage of hellish weaponry. Demonically infused projectiles tore through space, distorting reality as they approached. Without thinking, Superman positioned himself in the path of destruction. The shells struck him with the force to vaporize continents, yet he stood firm. Each explosion erupted harmlessly against his chest, the light reflecting off his emblem, a bright red and gold S, that had not yet been tainted by this universe's despair. To the mortals witnessing from their ships, it was as if an angel had descended. Crewmen fell to their knees, whispering prayers to the Emperor, believing they had witnessed a miracle. "By the throne," one officer gasped, "the Emperor protects." Yet what they saw was no servant of the Imperium. It was an outsider, a being who fought not for faith, but for life itself. Superman moved through the battlefield like a storm. disarming chaos vessels without killing, ripping apart corrupted ships and throwing their debris into the void to prevent further bloodshed. The demons within those ships howled, their whispers reaching him. They called him by names he didn't understand: the false god, the shining one, the intruder of order. Their psychic energy clawed at his mind, showing him visions of despair, of worlds consumed, of humanity enslaved to endless war. But even as his thoughts trembled, Superman's resolve grew stronger. He understood now. This was a universe drowning in darkness, and its people had forgotten what hope felt like. After the last Chaos cruiser detonated, silence fell over the war zone. The Imperial ships began hailing him, their communications full of confusion and reverence. Superman floated before the flagship, a vessel larger than any city he'd ever seen. The Gothic towers and golden statues of the Emperor seemed like relics of both faith and fear. He listened to the transmission crackling through the void. Unidentified entity. This is Lord Admiral Varanth of the Imperial Navy. State your allegiance and purpose. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind. Superman hesitated. The words God Emperor struck him strangely. He had encountered beings who called themselves gods before, some benevolent, others monstrous, but here, there was a tone of fanaticism in every syllable. Still, he responded calmly, "My name is Kal-El. I come in peace. I'm here to help." The reply was silence. Then a chorus of fearful whispers among the bridge crew. In the Imperium, help was a foreign word, and peace was a forgotten concept. The Admiral, hardened by centuries of war and indoctrination, viewed every anomaly as a threat. "You will submit for inspection by the Inquisition," he ordered. No being wields such power without the Emperor's sanction. Superman could sense their fear, an entire civilization built upon suspicion and survival. He wanted to explain, to reason, but before he could, his super hearing caught something else. Another fleet, deeper in the void, chanting in a language of nightmares. The warp rippled again as something immense began to emerge, a demon fleet drawn by his light, by his presence. They saw him as prey, a soul that did not belong. The tears in reality widened, and the very fabric of space howled. Superman turned toward the encroaching darkness. His eyes glowed red with determination. "Not today," he muttered, then launched forward like a living weapon, ready to protect even those who feared him. The Imperium soldiers watched in silence as he vanished into the black, a beam of light cutting through the storm. For the first time in millennia, some of them felt a spark, something that had no place in their grim galaxy: hope. The Imperium of man was not accustomed to miracles that didn't come from the Emperor. When the reports spread through the fleet of a glowing man who stopped a chaos onslaught with his bare hands, most dismissed it as censor corruption or heretical nonsense. But the survivors from the battle swore by it. They described a being who moved faster than light, whose eyes burned like twin suns, whose presence alone silenced the warp's whispers. The priests on board called it a sign from the Emperor. The commanders, however, feared it was a test. In the Imperium, faith and paranoia were two sides of the same coin. Messages raced through the astropathic network, transmitted by tortured psychers whose minds burned from the strain. Word reached nearby systems and then the nearest inquisitorial watch stations. The existence of a being powerful enough to shatter demon ships, unaided, demanded immediate scrutiny. Within days, multiple factions within the Imperium began to take interest. The ecclesiarchy saw the event as divine proof of the Emperor's continued guidance. The Adeptus Mechanicus wanted to study the being's biology and technology, convinced it might be some lost relic of the dark age of technology. The Inquisition prepared to judge it, suspecting another chaos deception. The Imperium was vast, fractured, and paranoid, and now it had a new mystery to fight over. Meanwhile, Superman had followed the fleet back to a world under Imperial control. The planet was a fortress, its skies filled with warships, its surface scarred by centuries of bombardment. He descended from orbit slowly, careful not to frighten the defenders below. Even so, every gun on the planet turned toward him the moment his presence was detected. He could hear the panic in the Vox traffic, the shouts of officers ordering batteries to stand by, the prayers of soldiers begging the Emperor for protection. To them, anything unexplained was potential heresy. Superman landed outside the planetary command citadel, raising his hands to show peace. The soldiers trembled behind their lasguns, unsure whether to worship or fire. An inquisitor arrived shortly after, an old man in ornate armor, bearing the sigil of the Inquisition's Ordo Hereticus. His eyes were sharp, his expression colder than the void. He approached Superman without fear, though the power radiating from the Kryptonian made the air vibrate. The Inquisitor's voice carried the weight of 1,000 executions. "You will explain your presence, creature. Speak truthfully, or I will burn your soul clean in the Emperor's name." Superman could feel the hostility, but he remained calm. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "I don't know how I got here, but I mean no harm. I just want to help." The Inquisitor studied him carefully. His psychic aura revealed no taint, no trace of warp corruption. That, in itself, was suspicious. No being so powerful could exist without attracting the attention of chaos. Yet Superman's essence was pure, almost blindingly so. "No harm," the Inquisitor repeated quietly, as if testing the words. "Then you will submit to examination. If you are truthful, the Emperor will judge your soul as pure. If not..." His hand brushed against the handle of his Inferno pistol. Superman sighed softly but nodded. He had dealt with mistrust before. This was simply on a scale he'd never imagined. He was taken to the Mechanicus facility on the planet, a colossal complex filled with sacred machinery and chanting tech priests. They surrounded him, scanning and measuring, muttering binary prayers to the Omnissiah. When they realized his body defied all known biological understanding, their awe turned to obsession. His cells absorbed solar energy at impossible efficiency. His structure was denser than adamantium, and his power core emitted no warp signature. Some believed he was an artificial god, a machine spirit incarnate. Others whispered that he was the Emperor reborn. The Inquisitor silenced those voices quickly. Heresy spread too easily. Across the Imperium, debate ignited. High Lords in Terra's distant halls received the first cryptic reports. Was this a tool sent by the Emperor, or an abomination to be purged? The ecclesiarchy pushed for a proclamation of sainthood, while the Inquisition's Ordo Xenos warned of the dangers of false prophets. Even the Adeptus Astartes took interest. Several chapters dispatched strike cruisers to witness this being firsthand. The Blood Angels saw in him a vision of redemption. The Black Templars saw a potential threat to their faith. The Grey Knights, ever wary of the warp, remained silent, but their Grand Masters watched closely. Superman, unaware of the full extent of this political storm, spent his time learning about this strange new humanity. He walked through the fortress cities, seeing people living under the shadow of fear, worshipping the Emperor with desperate devotion. He helped repair machinery, healed the wounded with his speed, and lifted collapsed structures with ease. The people began to whisper his name. To them, he was a saint come to life, a living miracle who saved lives without asking for worship or tribute. Children followed him through the streets, calling him the Angel of Soul. For the first time in generations, laughter returned to that war-torn world. The Inquisitor, however, was not convinced. He observed the growing hope among the population and saw danger. Hope in the Imperium was unpredictable. It could lead to rebellion as easily as faith. "You are disrupting order," he told Superman. "These people cannot be given dreams. Dreams lead to heresy." Superman looked at him with disbelief. They've lived in fear their entire lives. They need to believe in something better. The Inquisitor's reply was chilling. Better is irrelevant. Survival is all that matters. Mercy breeds weakness, and weakness invites chaos. Their conversation was interrupted when a new psychic disturbance rippled through the warp. The demonic entities had felt Superman's light again. To them, he was a beacon of purity that had no place in their corrupted domain. The planet trembled as a rift began to form above the atmosphere, spilling crimson light across the sky. The Inquisitor's guards panicked, thinking it was divine wrath, but Superman looked up calmly, his eyes narrowing. He could sense the horror emerging, feel the twisted energies trying to pierce reality. Without waiting for permission, he launched into the sky. The Inquisitor watched him vanish into the clouds, his crimson cape a streak of light cutting through the chaos. For the first time in centuries, the old man felt something stir in his chest, a faint, forgotten feeling that defied his training and doctrine. He didn't recognize it at first, but as the people around him knelt and prayed, as they looked up with tears of wonder, he understood. It was the same thing that once built empires and inspired crusades before fear consumed it. Hope. Asterisk. The first encounter between Superman and the Adeptus Astartes occurred sooner than anyone expected. When reports of the Starborn Angel reached the nearest Imperial strike force, the response was immediate. A detachment of Space Marines from the Ultramarines chapter was dispatched to the planet to investigate and, if necessary, eliminate the anomaly. To them, the idea of an unregistered being performing miracles in the Emperor's domain was not a sign of divine intervention. It was a potential threat to the Imperium's stability. The Space Marines did not debate or speculate. They acted. Their Thunderhawks pierced the clouds like falling meteors, blue and gold hulls blazing through the atmosphere. The people below watched with awe and dread as the Emperor's angels of death descended. Superman stood among the civilians he had been helping rebuild a collapsed hab block when he heard the sonic booms. He looked up, his senses stretching beyond the sky, and immediately recognized the disciplined precision in their approach. These were soldiers highly trained, methodical, and dangerous. He could feel the weight of their purpose even before they landed. When the first Thunderhawk touched down, the earth trembled. Massive figures emerged from the smoke, genetically enhanced giants clad in ceramite armor, their every step a reminder of their divine heritage. Each bore the symbol of the Ultramarines, their blue armor etched with purity seals and scripture. Their leader, Captain Thasius, approached the Kryptonian, his bolt pistol holstered but his hand resting near it in readiness. "Identify yourself," the captain commanded, his voice amplified through his vox. "By the authority of Robert Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and Lord Commander of the Imperium, state your name and purpose." Superman regarded them with calm respect. "My name is Kal-El. I'm not from your universe. I mean you no harm." The Marines exchanged glances through their helmets. To them, every word sounded like a riddle or a lie. Captain Thasius stepped closer. "No man stands before the Adeptus Astartes unbowed," he said. "If you are a servant of the Emperor, you will kneel. If you are not, then you will fall." The civilians watching nearby gasped, some dropping to their knees instinctively, praying to avoid divine wrath. Superman's expression softened. "Where I come from," he said quietly, "kneeling isn't how we show respect. We protect those who can't protect themselves." That simple statement was enough to ignite tension. To the Astartes, his refusal to kneel bordered on blasphemy. Several Marines raised their weapons, their bolters humming with lethal power. The air crackled as Superman took a slow step forward, unthreatening but firm. "I'm not here to fight you," he said, though his voice carried a steel edge. "But I won't let you harm these people." Captain Thasius signaled his men to hold fire, his warrior instincts warring with his faith. He could sense no deceit, no corruption, and yet something about this being unsettled him. The Kryptonian radiated strength unlike anything he had encountered, a power that dwarfed even the most blessed Astartes. Then the warp screamed again. The ground split open as a new rift tore reality apart, demonic shapes clawing their way into existence. The timing could not have been worse. Captain Thasius barked orders, his men forming a defensive line with flawless precision. The demons poured forth, grotesque creatures of rage and madness, shrieking as they surged toward the city. Superman turned toward the portal, his eyes glowing crimson. Without hesitation, he launched himself into the swarm, his fists moving faster than the human eye could follow. Each blow shattered monsters that had survived plasma fire. His heat vision burned through warped flesh that should have been immune to material weapons. The Space Marines fought alongside him, their bolters roaring, their chainswords screaming. For the first time, they witnessed something that defied all logic, an unarmored man standing shoulder to shoulder with the Emperor's chosen, fighting as their equal. The demons focused their fury on Superman, sensing his purity as an offense to their existence. He moved like a blur of light, saving wounded Marines, shielding civilians, and sealing parts of the rift with sheer force. Captain Thasius watched, disbelief turning into grudging admiration. The Kryptonian fought with a conviction that mirrored the Emperor's ideal, a protector of humanity who neither commanded nor judged, but acted. When the last demon was banished, silence fell over the battlefield. The Marines stood amidst the smoking ruins, their armor scarred, their spirits shaken. Superman hovered above the crater where the rift had been, his cape fluttering in the wind. He looked exhausted, not from the battle itself, but from the weight of what he had seen, the sheer level of corruption infecting this universe. Captain Thasius approached him slowly. "You fight with honor," he said at last, "and without fear. No mortal should possess such strength." Superman landed beside him, dust clinging to his shoulders. "I'm not a god," he replied softly. "Just someone trying to help." The captain studied him in silence, his eyes narrowing behind his helmet lenses. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but the Imperium does not take kindly to unclaimed heroes. The Inquisition will decide your fate." Superman could hear the suspicion, but also the faint respect buried beneath it. "I'm not interested in fate," he said. "Only in stopping whatever keeps attacking these people." Thasius didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to his brothers. "Gather the wounded. We return to orbit. The Inquisition will want their report." Before they departed, one of the younger Marines, his armor marked with the insignia of a neophyte, hesitated and looked back at Superman. "You fought like one of us," he said quietly through his vox. "Maybe better." Superman smiled faintly. "No," he said. "I fought like someone who refuses to give up." The Marine nodded once before boarding his THUNDERH as the ships lifted off. The people below began to chant not prayers to the Emperor this time, but a new name whispered with awe. Some called him the Light-Bearer, others the Starborn Savior. The Ecclesiarchy's priests would later condemn these words as heresy, but the seed had already been planted. The Imperium's faith had always been built on fear. Now, for the first time in ages, they were seeing a different kind of power, one born not from divinity or tyranny, but from compassion and courage. And for the Adeptus Astartes who witnessed it firsthand, even their battle-hardened hearts could not easily dismiss the memory of the man who fought like a god, yet refused to be one. The warp pulsed like a living storm, its tides shifting with hunger as word of the Kryptonian's presence spread across its infernal expanse. To the demons and chaos lords who ruled within, his arrival was not just an anomaly, it was an offense. A being of pure light, untouched by corruption, walking the mortal plane of the 41st millennium, was a wound in their dominion. The chaos gods felt his existence like a burn upon their essence. Korn's rage boiled, Slaanesh's desire twisted into envy. Tzeentch whispered schemes to consume his purity, and Nurgle chuckled in decay, savoring the challenge of breaking something so untainted. Within the warp, alliances of hatred formed. and a single decision was made. The man of steel would be tested, broken, and remade into a symbol of their dominion on the material plane. Superman began noticing strange disturbances, places where reality wavered like ripples in water, where the air turned cold and colors dulled. He could hear faint whispers, voices that tried to burrow into his mind. They spoke in countless tongues, promising power, knowledge, or release from the endless struggle. He ignored them, but each time they grew louder, more seductive. His Kryptonian physiology protected him from the warp's corruption, but not from its presence. It was like standing in a storm that whispered his deepest fears. The first direct contact came on a desolate moon orbiting a dying world. Superman had followed a distress signal from an Imperial transport, only to find the ship torn apart, its crew slaughtered. Symbols of blood and rot were smeared across the hull. As he moved through the wreckage, he felt something alien watching him. The shadows twisted, forming shapes that should not exist. Then the air split open, and they came demons of Khorne, their armor forged from hate, their weapons dripping with souls. They roared as they charged, eager to test this interloper who dared defy chaos. Superman met them head-on. His heat vision burned through the first wave. His fists shattered axes and skulls, his every movement a blur of righteous fury. But these were not like the monsters he had faced before. Their weapons tore through the void with impossible weight, their blows fueled by raw emotion rather than physics. Each impact sent shockwaves across the lunar surface. Superman fought with precision, refusing to kill if he could avoid it, but the demons gave him no choice. When the last one fell, their bodies dissolved into crimson mist, laughter echoing in the void. "Blood for the blood god," the voices whispered as they vanished. He barely had time to recover before the warp tore open again. This time, the air shimmered with sickly light as the followers of Nurgle emerged, rotting, bloated monstrosities that carried death like a disease. The stench was unbearable, their very breath corrupting the ground beneath them. Superman's vision blurred for the first time. His invulnerable body felt a strange weakness as the air filled with toxic spores. He coughed a sound that startled even him. Never before had he felt sickness. But he refused to yield. Drawing power from the dim star above, he unleashed a burst of energy that incinerated the corruption in an instant. The demons screamed as their rot turned to ash. Through the warp, Tzeentch observed with fascination. To him, Superman was a puzzle, an unplanned variable in an endless game of fate. The Changer of Ways sent his own emissary, a Lord of Change, to confront the Kryptonian not through force but temptation. It appeared as a towering figure of feathers and flame, eyes blinking across its body. "You fight for hope," it crooned, "but hope is a lie. Let me show you the truth. Let me teach you how to shape destiny, how to end suffering forever." The creature's voice wove illusions around him, visions of Krypton reborn, of Earth united in peace, of a universe free from death. For a moment, the temptation almost worked. Superman saw his parents, smiling, alive again. He saw Lois, he saw a world without war. His heart ached. But then he heard the faintest cry, the voice of a dying child from the planet below, real and desperate. The illusion shattered. His eyes flared with heat, and he spoke with quiet defiance. "If ending suffering means becoming like you, I'd rather fight forever." His heat vision cut through the demon's form, burning away its lies until only ash and echo remained. But every battle took its toll. Superman began to realize that the warp was learning from him. Each encounter grew more calculated, more invasive. When he slept, he dreamed of red skies and screaming faces. The demons had begun to shape nightmares tailored to his mind scenes, of failing those he loved, of becoming a tyrant, of turning into the very monster he fought against. They whispered that he could never save everyone, that his ideals were poisoned in a universe built on cruelty. Even his will, forged through countless trials, began to falter at the edges. Meanwhile, the Imperium watched from afar. To the Inquisition, these repeated demon incursions centered around the Kryptonian were proof that he was a warp anomaly. Some demanded his immediate execution. Others, especially among the Adeptus Astartes, argued that he was fighting chaos more effectively than any mortal could. Factions formed around his name, some calling for his sanctification, others for his destruction. The ecclesiarchy declared a temporary ban on depicting him in shrines, fearing a new cult of worship. Yet, despite the turmoil, stories of his deeds spread like wildfire across the stars. Planets in despair spoke his name in secret prayers, hoping the Man of Steel might appear from the heavens when all seemed lost. Chaos responded by sending something far greater than demons. On a dying world of ash and bone, a champion of Khorne, an ancient demon prince known as Kalgareth, the Blood Reaper, was given one command: find the alien who defies the gods and break him. The demon prince emerged from the warp with a roar that shook continents. His armor was forged from the skulls of slain demigods, his axe wreathed in the blood of fallen angels. Superman sensed the eruption from light years away. He arrived in moments, the ground cracking beneath him as he landed before the towering monster. Kalgareth grinned, his voice booming across the wasteland. So this is the false god of light, the one who dares bring hope to the domain of despair. Superman stood silent, his eyes glowing like twin suns. You'll find I'm not that easy to kill. The demon laughed, the sound like the tearing of flesh. Then let us find out, little god. And as their clash began, the warp itself shuddered, its currents bending around two forces utterly opposed, one born of rage, the other of resolve. The planet chosen for their confrontation had long been dead, its surface reduced to ash and bone from centuries of endless war. The air was thick with the residue of past battles, ash from burned cities, rust from fallen war machines, and the faint psychic screams of those who had died worshipping false gods. In that grim silence, two figures stood facing one another, symbols of opposing forces in every sense. Kalgareth, the Blood Reaper, towered like a mountain of armor and hate, his eyes burning with endless rage, his wings torn and reforged from the remains of fallen seraphs. His voice shook the air as he spoke the words of Khorne's tongue, a challenge that resonated through both reality and the warp. Across from him stood Superman, calm and unflinching, his cape torn and his armorless body glowing faintly with solar energy. The demon prince grinned, his teeth like molten blades. You have strength, mortal god. But strength without slaughter is weakness. Come, show me what your hope is worth. He charged, the ground cracking beneath his steps, every movement an earthquake. Superman met the charge without hesitation. Their first impact shattered the silence of the world, sending shockwaves that flattened distant mountains. Kalgareth's axe, forged from the heart of a dying star, came down with enough force to sunder a fortress. Superman caught it with both hands, the ground beneath him liquefying from the pressure. The demon laughed as sparks and blood-like energy sprayed around them. Yes, he roared. Bleed for me. Superman's eyes flared red, and his heat vision struck the demon's chest, burning through the armor of damned souls. The creature howled but pressed forward, swinging again. The two clashed again and again, each blow powerful enough to crack the planet's crust. The demon's fury was endless, every strike feeding off the bloodshed around them, even the ghosts of wars long ended. Superman realized he was fighting not just a being, but an idea, the embodiment of war itself. Kalgareth's laughter echoed through the warp, feeding off the energy of battle. You cannot win, he bellowed. Every strike you make empowers me. Every struggle makes me stronger. Superman moved faster than the eye could follow, his fists striking with the precision of a god. He launched the demon into the sky, following him into the upper atmosphere, where the thin air glowed red from the heat of their combat. The demon retaliated by opening a portal mid-battle, summoning blades of pure warp energy that rained down like fire. Superman flew through them, deflecting and burning them away, but each strike drained his solar reserves. The nearby star was dim, starved by the corruption of the warp. He could feel his strength waning, but his determination only hardened. Kelgareth taunted him between blows. You fight for mortals who would burn you as a heretic. You protect a species that worships death. Tell me, why do you care for such wretches? Superman's voice was steady, even as he struggled against the demon's strength. Because someone has to. Because even in the darkest place, life deserves a chance. The demon sneered, driving his axe into the Kryptonian side. The wound smoked, the edges sizzling with warp energy. Superman gritted his teeth but refused to fall. His punch landed like thunder, breaking Kelgareth's jaw and sending him crashing back to the surface. They collided again among the ruins of an ancient battlefield littered with rusted titans and shattered banners. Superman's body glowed brighter, drawing what little sunlight filtered through the crimson sky. The demon rose from the crater, his body healing instantly as he screamed praises to Korn. You cannot stop what is eternal. He howled. War is the truth of existence. Superman lifted a fallen war machine, a wrecked warlord titan, and hurled it with superhuman strength. The impact detonated like a nova, engulfing both in flame. Out of the inferno emerged the demon, laughing, his armor molten but his will unbroken. Superman realized that brute force alone would not win. The demon thrived on conflict. Every strike, every act of violence only fed him. To defeat him, Superman would need to end the cycle of rage itself, to deny chaos the one thing it craved: war. He stopped attacking. He floated above the ground, blood dripping from his wounds, his eyes dim but resolute. The demon paused, confused by the sudden stillness. Why do you stop? Kelgareth roared. Fight me, feed me. Superman shook his head. You don't understand. You only exist because people believe that killing makes them strong. I don't. The demon screamed and lunged forward, his axe swinging for Superman's neck. In that instant, Superman moved not to strike, but to disarm. His hands blurred as he caught the weapon, snapped its shaft, and drove the broken handle into the ground. A shockwave erupted, not of rage, but of rejection. The warp energy recoiled as if burned. Kelgareth staggered, roaring in disbelief. You cannot deny me. I am eternal. Superman's eyes blazed brighter than before. Then live forever, he said, alone. He flew forward, faster than light, driving the demon through the planet's crust, through its core, and into the void of space beyond. There, bathed in the dying light of the star, Superman unleashed everything he had. His heat vision, his strength, his very willpower became a weapon of light. The warp tore open around them, and Kelgareth's form began to disintegrate, the energies of Korn screaming in fury as they were forced back into their dimension. This is not victory. The demon roared as his body dissolved. You cannot destroy war. Superman's voice echoed through the collapsing storm. Maybe not. But I can stop you from spreading it. When the light faded, only silence remained. The dead planet was broken, its crust shattered, but the warp tier above it had sealed. Superman drifted among the debris, his breathing heavy, his suit scorched, and his skin marred with deep crimson cuts. He could feel the distant pull of chaos still watching, still hating, but for now, they had been pushed back. The Imperium's long-range sensors detected the energy surge and recorded it as an anomalous warp event. To those who heard of it later, it was said that a single figure of light had faced a demon prince and banished him alone, without prayer or faith, only will. From the warp's depths, the chaos gods raged, but even they could not erase what had been done. A mortal had denied them their feast. The story spread in whispers, even to the farthest ships of the Imperium. Some called him the outsider, others the light that fights the dark, and though the Imperium would never officially recognize him, those who had seen the battle with their own eyes would forever remember the being who defied a god of war and stood victorious. Across the stars, the tale of the alien who had slain a demon prince traveled like wildfire through the Imperium's fragmented communications. It became a story whispered in the depths of hive cities, preyed upon by serfs, debated among inquisitors, and studied by the Adeptus Mechanicus. Some called him a false prophet, others the Emperor's chosen reborn. The ecclesiarchy attempted to suppress the growing myth, but even they could not silence the spreading rumors. A being who could defeat a demon prince without invoking the Emperor's name was something they did not understand and therefore feared. But in the upper echelons of the Imperium, the rumor reached the one place no mortal dared to speak of lightly, the Golden Throne on Terra. Within the palace where the Astronomicon burned and 10,000 souls died daily to feed its light, the custodians who guarded the Emperor's husk heard psychic murmurs through the warp. Something new had entered the galaxy, something that burned brightly, too brightly to be ignored. The Emperor's presence within the warp, fractured though it was, stirred faintly. For the first time in millennia, his infinite awareness shifted, like a sleeping god turning in his grave. He sensed the foreign light moving through his Imperium, a light uncorrupted, unbent by the chaos that had consumed everything far away. On the world where his battle with Kelgareth had ended, Superman hovered above the wreckage, staring at the broken horizon. He had begun to understand the scale of this universe. Every corner of it was soaked in blood and faith, every life chained to a god or an idea. The Imperium's people were not free. They were terrified, bound by devotion that had replaced hope. He wondered how many more would die before someone tried to end this endless cycle of fear. Yet even as he questioned it, he felt something stir a pull in his mind, a whisper not of the warp, but of something vast and ancient calling to him. It wasn't malicious. It was curiosity, awareness, and power unlike anything he had ever felt before. He followed the psychic beacon across the void, faster than light, until the stars themselves bent in his wake. It led him to the Sol system, though he did not know it by name. As he approached, Imperial defenses across Mars and Luna lit up, alarmed by the sudden appearance of an energy signature rivaling their own star. Entire defense grids activated, void shields powered up, and the Imperial Navy scrambled to intercept. Thousands of ships moved into formation, but none dared fire. They watched as a single glowing figure slowed near Terra's orbit, his cape drifting weightlessly, his expression calm. The closer he got, the more the Emperor's psychic presence resonated, almost as if the universe itself recognized the encounter that was about to occur. The custodians were the first to act. Golden-clad warriors of unmatched skill, they assembled in the inner sanctum, weapons primed, their armor glinting like suns beneath the hollow light of the throne. The air was heavy with incense and machine oil, the sound of chanting filling the endless halls. Tech priests and high lords gathered in secret chambers, terrified that whatever had arrived would undo the fragile balance of their rule. But none could stop him. Superman passed through the Imperial Palace's outer defenses as if they did not exist, not with violence, but with purpose. Less fire and plasma bursts meant nothing to him. He moved with restraint, disarming every weapon without killing a soul. By the time he reached the Eternity Gate, an army of custodians awaited. The leader among them, Shield Captain Valinor, raised his guardian spear and spoke with authority that shook the chamber. None may approach the Golden Throne without the Emperor's command. Superman stopped, his eyes meeting the captain's visor. "I'm not here to harm your Emperor," he said. "I need to understand what this place is, why your people suffer for a man who never speaks." His words were almost blasphemy, and yet there was no hatred in them, only sorrow. The captain felt something he had not in centuries: hesitation. He could sense no deception, no taint of chaos, only truth. After a long silence, he lowered his weapon slightly. "You seek to understand?" he said quietly. "Then prepare yourself. The Emperor allows no one to leave unchanged." The great doors of the throne room opened, ancient gears grinding like the turning of time itself. Superman stepped inside. The light was blinding, the air thick with psychic energy so immense it almost crushed him. Even his Kryptonian body trembled under the weight of it. The Golden Throne loomed ahead, a colossal machine of godlike scale, its golden form entwined with cables and pulsing conduits that stretched into eternity. Upon it sat the Emperor of mankind, his body little more than a decaying shell, his mind burning brighter than any star. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, without words, the Emperor's voice entered Superman's mind. It was not sound, but thought, deeper than speech, older than memory. "You are not of this universe." Superman bowed his head slightly. "No," he answered, his voice echoing through the psychic space between them. "I came through an accident. I've seen your people. They live in fear, worshipping you like a god. You could save them, why don't you?" The Emperor's response was like thunder and sorrow intertwined. "I have tried. For 10,000 years, I have kept humanity alive. You do not understand what it means to fight gods who feed on belief. To speak is to awaken them. To act is to risk everything." Superman looked up, his eyes glowing faintly with compassion. "Then let me help you. Let me show them they can have hope without fear." A flicker passed through the Emperor's decayed eyes, an echo of what he once was, the visionary who dreamed of uniting mankind without religion. "Hope is dangerous here," he warned. "It can ignite rebellion as easily as salvation. They do not need hope. They need control." Superman stepped closer, undeterred. "No, they need to remember why they're human." The psychic pressure around him intensified, nearly crushing his will, but he stood firm. The Emperor studied him in silence, then finally said, "You are light in a place that devours light. Your presence weakens the warp's hold. But it will not forgive you for it. They will call you heretic, savior, god, it will not matter. You will be hunted." Superman's answer was simple. "Let them hunt me. I'll still protect them." The chamber fell silent once more. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Emperor's psychic field dimmed slightly, not in weakness, but in acknowledgement. The custodians outside felt the shift, though they did not understand it. When Superman turned and walked away, the Emperor's faint whisper followed him, almost like a blessing carried on the wind of the warp. "Then go, man of tomorrow. Be the hope they have forgotten." Within the cold labyrinthine halls of the Inquisition, reports of the alien known as Superman had become a matter of obsession. Across Terra and beyond, Inquisitors whispered of him as though he were both saint and heretic. His actions saving Imperial citizens, defying planetary governors, and refusing to kneel before the ecclesiarchy had shattered the fragile structure of blind obedience upon which the Imperium thrived. He had become a living paradox, a being who performed miracles without prayer, who brought hope without invoking the Emperor's name. For the Inquisition, such a thing could not exist without threat. Hope without chains was heresy. Among those who sought him most relentlessly was Inquisitor Marantha Vale of the Ordo Hereticus, a woman whose faith burned with ruthless precision. To her, the alien's refusal to submit to the Imperium's creed was proof of corruption. Yet she could not deny the testimonies flooding in from worlds he had touched, stories of starving hives receiving food, of mutant children spared execution, of soldiers who spoke of light in their dreams. Each account contradicted everything the Imperium taught. To question them was blasphemy. To believe them, treason. But Marantha was not a fool. She knew power when she saw it, and she intended to understand it before condemning it. Superman's own path had brought him to the world of Epitaph Prime, a planet broken by centuries of war and bureaucracy. The air was toxic, the sky a perpetual gray, and the people lived beneath the gaze of towering statues of the Emperor. The Arbites patrolled the streets, executing anyone who dared to speak of reform. When Superman descended, he found a city so consumed by fear that even kindness was regarded as a trap. He tore through the pollution clouds and brought sunlight to the ground for the first time in generations. When he began dismantling the weapon factories that enslaved thousands, the local governor declared him a Xenos insurgent. Within hours, the Inquisition arrived. Marentha came with her retinue of stormtroopers, psychers, and servo skulls. She expected to find a demon or a trick of chaos. Instead, she found him standing amidst broken chains and freed workers, his cape torn, his expression calm but resolute. "You're interfering with Imperial law," she declared, her voice sharp behind the rebirth mask. "You claim to help humanity, yet you defy its rightful order. Who do you serve?" Superman looked at her, eyes steady, and said, "I serve the people who are suffering." "Isn't that what your Emperor wanted?" Those words pierced her like a blade. She had spent her entire life believing that obedience was purity, that the Emperor demanded order above all. Yet something in his tone, neither arrogance nor defiance, but genuine compassion, made her question for the briefest moment. Still, she would not show weakness. "You presume to know the Emperor's will, and you speak heresy as though it were mercy." He stepped closer, unarmed, unthreatening. "If mercy is heresy here, then maybe the system is broken." Her guards raised their weapons instantly, but she held up a hand to stop them. She wanted to see more, to understand how he could speak such blasphemy with conviction, yet radiate no psychic taint. She studied him through her Auspex readings. No corruption, no warp signature, no sign of deceit. His power was entirely physical, pure energy drawn from the sun. And yet, she could not explain the aura of serenity that surrounded him. It reminded her, unwillingly, of the stories of saints before the age of apostasy, when faith was a choice rather than law. Over the next hours, the confrontation turned to conversation. Superman questioned her about the Imperium, its endless wars, its executions, its worship of a silent corpse. Marentha responded with doctrine, each answer colder than the last. "Order is survival," she said. "Without it, chaos consumes all." But he countered softly, "If order demands suffering, then it's not order, it's fear." His words dug deep into the cracks she had buried beneath layers of duty. She had seen the horrors of chaos, the warp entities that devoured worlds, but she had also seen the cruelty of her own kind. Perhaps the line between them was thinner than she wanted to admit. Their exchange was interrupted when a squad of Adeptus Astartes from the Black Templars arrived. They had been summoned by the Ecclesiarchy to execute the alien in the name of the Emperor. Marentha's authority was challenged instantly, but she stood her ground. The Templar Marshal demanded Superman's immediate death, calling him a false idol. The atmosphere grew electric, tension thick enough to choke the air. Superman did not fight. Instead, he turned to the towering Astartes and said, "If I am your enemy, then strike me. But look into the eyes of these people before you do. Ask if killing me makes their lives better." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the Templars hesitated, unused to being questioned in such a way. They could feel no corruption, no deceit, only the impossible weight of his sincerity. One of them muttered a prayer under his breath, uncertain whether it was to the Emperor or to something else entirely. Marentha finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. "Stand down. He will answer to me." Against centuries of conditioning, the Astartes obeyed. That night, Marentha sat in her ship's sanctum, staring at the hololiths of ancient texts she was forbidden to read. The alien's words had reopened wounds she had long sealed, doubts about the Imperium's righteousness, Memories of the countless innocents burned for the crime of questioning. Superman's compassion was not weakness, she realized. It was strength that required no fear to sustain it. And yet, she could not simply abandon her faith. To do so was death, and worse, damnation. The next day, she approached him again, this time without her guards. "You think you can save this galaxy," she said quietly. "You think hope can stand against chaos. You don't know what hope becomes here. It's a weapon. Twisted, corrupted." Superman looked at her, his eyes glowing faintly as the sun rose behind the ash clouds. "Then maybe it needs to be reborn." For the first time in her life, an inquisitor lowered her head, not in submission, but in thought. She could not condemn him, nor could she defend him. The moral order of her world was breaking apart, and in its place stood something terrifyingly simple: the possibility that compassion, not fear, might be the Emperor's true will. And though she would never admit it aloud in that moment, Marantha Vale felt something she had long forgotten, a flicker of faith untainted by fear. The warp was never still. It churned and twisted like an ocean of madness, its tides made of emotion and nightmare. For millennia, it had fed on the fear, hate, and faith of humanity, turning their very souls into fuel for gods of corruption. When Superman entered this universe, the warp took notice immediately. His presence was an anomaly, a wound in its living fabric. He was not born of psychic energy, nor shaped by it. His soul, if it could be called that, was pure light, a being of purpose unbound by the chaos of mortal belief. To the entities that ruled the Imperium, he was not prey, but poison. And so they watched. They whispered. They plotted. At first, Superman did not understand what the warp was. To him, it was a strange dimension that seemed to bend reality, infecting worlds with hallucinations and horrors. But after his meeting with the Emperor, he could feel its pull, an invisible pressure pressing against his mind whenever he reached too high, too far, as though the universe itself resisted his strength. The warp could not touch him directly, but it could sense him. It could feel that he did not belong. He was an infection in a system built on suffering, and the warp would not tolerate something so pure for long. When he flew through the void, he began noticing the difference. The light from distant suns felt dimmer. The stars themselves seemed to flicker unnaturally. Space around him distorted not physically, but emotionally. The warp bled into reality wherever he went, drawn to his energy like moths to flame. He began to experience visions, faces of people he had saved on Krypton, the screams of soldiers from battles he had never fought, the cries of billions across the Imperium. It was as if the warp was trying to invade his mind, to make him feel its despair. But instead of breaking him, it only strengthened his resolve. He understood then that the warp was not a place, it was a reflection of all the pain in this universe. And its darkness was born from the hearts of those who had lost hope. On the planet of Thessalon Ix, a world plagued by demonic incursions, Superman tested the limits of his strength against the corruption. When he landed, the very ground pulsed with warp energy, crimson lightning splitting the sky. The people hid in underground catacombs, too afraid to speak, while demons roamed the wastelands above. The Astartes of the Grey Knights had declared the planet lost. Yet Superman refused to abandon it. He faced the demons head-on, his fists striking through entities made of thought and sin. Each time he struck, the demons screamed not in pain, but in confusion. They could not understand him. His blows carried no psychic energy, no faith, no corruption. To them, he was an empty vessel of impossible clarity. But the warp was cunning. The longer he fought, the more it learned. It began to reach into his memories, projecting illusions meant to weaken him. One moment he saw Krypton burning again, his parents' faces pleading through the flames. The next he saw Lois dying beneath the red sun, whispering that he had failed. The warp's power fed on doubt, and even Superman, for all his strength, was not without fear. He fell to one knee as the visions intensified, his mind drowning in the cacophony of a billion lost souls. He could feel something gnawing at the edges of his will, trying to rewrite him, to make him part of the warp's endless chorus of despair. Then, he remembered the Emperor's warning, "You are light in a place that devours light." He closed his eyes and drew a deep breath, focusing not on his pain but on the people who still needed him. Hope, he realized, was his weapon, not against monsters, but against the sickness of this reality. The warp was built on emotion, and it had no defense against hope untainted by faith or fear. Slowly, the illusions began to fade. The demons screamed louder, their forms unraveling as his inner light grew stronger. Superman rose, his eyes burning with golden fire. The warp's claws slipped from his mind like smoke, and the red storms above dissipated into pale sunlight. Word of what happened spread quickly. The Grey Knights who later arrived on Thessalon X could find no trace of demonic presence. The planet was clean, purged without ritual, faith, or sacrifice. Such a thing was impossible according to their doctrine. To them, it was a paradox. To the warp, it was an insult. Across the Imperium, ripples of outrage spread among the Chaos Gods. Khorne raged at a being who destroyed demons without hate. Tzeentch studied him with fascination, searching for a way to twist such purity into corruption. Nurgle longed to infect him, to see if decay could taint even that light. And Slaanesh watched with hungry delight, dreaming of the day hope itself could be made to scream. The warp began to fight back in subtle ways. It manipulated the dreams of humans who had seen Superman, planting fear that he was a false god, a seducer of faith. The ecclesiarchy declared him a blasphemy incarnate, while the Inquisition debated whether his power was a gift or a curse. Even the Emperor's Astronomicon flickered when Superman drew too close to Terra, as if the fabric of reality itself trembled in confusion. Yet through it all, Superman never wavered. He learned to sense the warp the way one might feel a storm in their bones. He could tell when a world was close to corruption, when the shadows in men's hearts grew too deep. Instead of attacking with violence, he began to heal not through psychic means, but by inspiring people to believe again. He showed soldiers mercy. He saved mutants from execution. He rebuilt broken cities with his hands. And everywhere he went, the warp receded slightly, like darkness before dawn. But the cost was growing. The more he acted, the more the warp tried to push back, twisting the universe around him. Time began to distort in his presence. Days passed like moments, and dreams bled into reality. He could hear whispers in languages he didn't understand, voices of gods who wanted him destroyed, or perhaps consumed. His Kryptonian body began to react strangely under the influence of the warp's psychic pressure. His solar cells fluctuated unpredictably, sometimes burning brighter than ever, other times weakening, as if drained by unseen forces. His very existence was becoming a paradox, a bridge between physical and immaterial realms, and though he didn't say it aloud, he knew the truth. The longer he remained in this universe, the more the warp would adapt to him. It would learn his nature, study his soul, and eventually find a way to corrupt even his light. Yet despite knowing that, Superman pressed forward. If the warp was born from humanity's despair, then maybe hope, genuine, fearless hope, could change it. Even if it consumed him in the end, he would not stop shining. The galaxy was burning again. Across the Imperium, chaos incursions flared like wounds torn open by invisible claws. Hive cities screamed, worlds fell silent, and the Imperium's armies, stretched thin and bleeding, fought endlessly to hold what little ground they had. In that endless void of suffering, a single symbol began to rise from the darkness, the mark of the Kryptonian. The alien savior who had come not as conqueror or prophet, but as something far more dangerous, a symbol of hope. It started as a whisper among the slaves and workers of Forge worlds, then spread to soldiers, refugees, even low-ranking priests who dared not speak it aloud. They called him the Starburn, the one who defied both gods and demons. Superman had seen enough of this universe to understand that change could not come from thrones or temples. It had to be born from the people themselves. The Emperor had warned him that hope was a dangerous fire, one that could burn civilizations as easily as it could light them. But Superman believed that the only way to fight the warp was not through war alone, but through belief in something better than fear. And so he began his crusade. Not of conquest, but of compassion. Not to rule, but to remind. It began on the world of Loren's Reach, a devastated planet on the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus. Once a thriving imperial bastion, it had been overrun by heretics and chaos cults. When Superman arrived, he found both sides locked in endless slaughter, Imperial Guard regiments fighting corrupted kin, priests preaching death over salvation. Instead of joining the battle, he landed between them, his very presence halting the fighting for a moment. Soldiers pointed lasguns at him. Cultists screamed praises to their dark gods. But when he spoke, his voice cut through the noise like thunder wrapped in calm. You are killing each other for masters who do not care if you live or die. Lay down your weapons. The real war is not between you, it's against the fear that rules you. No one moved at first. Then, one soldier, trembling, bleeding, exhausted, dropped his gun. Then another. Within minutes, hundreds followed. The cultists faltered, confused, their gods strangely silent. Superman did not destroy them. He restrained them, disarmed them, and gave the survivors a choice to rebuild together or die divided. And they did rebuild. Within days, the blood-soaked fields were cleared, and people of both factions worked side by side. To the Imperium, it was heresy. To the people of Loren's Reach, it was a miracle. News of this act spread faster than the Inquisition could contain it. Entire regiments began to desert the battlefield, not to flee, but to join what was being called the Crusade of Light. Superman never called it that himself. He saw it as something simpler, a movement of conscience. He traveled from world to world, not as a general but as a guide. On Agathon Prime, he convinced a rogue inquisitor to spare a group of mutants sentenced to death, proving that mutation did not always mean corruption. On Helios 7, he stopped an Adeptus Mechanicus purge by helping them restore their failing reactor with his own hands, showing them that logic and mercy could coexist. For the first time in thousands of years, parts of the Imperium began to change, not politically, but spiritually. Soldiers refused to execute civilians. Planetary governors opened granaries that had been sealed for decades. And through it all, Superman refused to claim leadership. He told them he was no god, no saint, only a man trying to do what was right. That honesty made him even more dangerous to the ecclesiarchy. The church declared him a blasphemer, a false angel meant to test humanity's faith. Inquisitors began hunting his followers, burning symbols of the Kryptonian crest wherever they found them. But repression only fueled the movement further. Entire battalions defected, replacing the imperial aquila with the crest of the House of El. On some worlds, priests began to reinterpret scripture, claiming that the Emperor had sent this being as a test to remind humanity of its purpose. The imperial truth, long buried under centuries of dogma, began to stir again, the dream of a humanity free of superstition and fear. Superman never wanted to start a rebellion, but that was what it had become. His presence fractured the Imperium's unity, but it also reignited something that had been dead for 10,000 years, hope without worship. On the world of Aaronhold, he stood before a gathering of million soldiers, workers, and refugees. The sky burned red from orbiting battle fleets, but they stood unafraid. Superman's cape billowed in the wind, tattered but defiant. "You don't need me," he told them. "You don't need gods or monsters to tell you who you are. The strength you seek, it's already inside you. You just forgot." The crowd's roar shook the mountains, not in worship, but in unity. But every act of light casts a longer shadow. The Inquisition called for his extermination, uniting even rival factions under one goal: the destruction of the alien heretic who dared to reshape faith. Assassins of the Officio Assassinorum were dispatched. Psychers tried to track his presence, but his energy signature was unlike anything they'd encountered, neither psychic nor material, something in between. The warp itself seemed to flicker wherever he went, as if uncertain whether to destroy or devour him. Still, Superman pressed on. He created sanctuaries, hidden havens for orphans, mutants, and refugees. He worked alongside renegade Astartes who had grown disillusioned with the Imperium's tyranny, teaching them restraint instead of wrath. He built bridges between Imperial commanders and alien races once condemned to extinction. It was fragile, temporary, always under threat, but for the first time in millennia, people began to imagine a future that wasn't built on fear. His followers adopted no formal hierarchy, no dogma. They called themselves the Dawnborn, bound by a single vow: to protect life, no matter the cost. Among them were humans, abhumans, even Xenos outcasts who sought redemption. The Imperium labeled them traitors. The Chaos Gods called them fools. But Superman called them family. He knew the cost of what he was doing. Every act of compassion invited more persecution. The Imperium's fleets grew more relentless, chaos more enraged. The warp screamed his name in hatred, the ecclesiarchy cursed it in sermons, and still he refused to yield. Wherever the darkness thickened, he went not as savior, but as shield. And as the galaxy trembled under the weight of two faiths, one of fear, one of hope, Superman stood at the heart of it, not as conqueror or martyr, but as the spark that reminded an entire species that the light within them had never truly died. The war for the soul of the galaxy reached its breaking point. Superman's crusade had spread too far, igniting hearts in places the ecclesiarchy had long ruled with fear. Entire systems whispered his name in secret, and banners bearing the Kryptonian crest appeared beside the Imperial Aquila, symbols of defiance wrapped in hope. The Inquisition declared an all-out purge, branding every follower of the Dawnborn as heretics and traitors to mankind. Fleets were mobilized, assassins dispatched, and even the High Lords of Terra convened to decide how to erase the Starburn from history. The Imperium could not tolerate a savior it did not control. But for every world burned in his name, another rose to defend him. And as the warp seethed, its gods too turned their gaze fully toward him. United for the first time in hatred. Superman could feel it, the universe itself bending under the tension of belief. He had never wanted this. What began as a mission of compassion had become a holy war. One waged in his name by those who misunderstood him and against him by those who feared him. His every act of kindness was twisted into rebellion. His refusal to kneel was seen as blasphemy. Still, he refused to strike back. Even when fleets surrounded the sanctuary worlds of the Dawnborn, he stood between them and the fire, absorbing the fury of orbital bombardments with his own body. His strength seemed limitless, but deep inside, he knew it was not. The longer he stayed in this universe, the more the warp pressed against him, studying him, trying to corrupt him. It whispered through dreams, promising him the power to save everyone if only he would surrender to its embrace. The Emperor, still bound to the Golden Throne, watched in silence. His psychic senses felt the growing storm across the warp, a surge of emotion so pure and bright that even the Astronomicon dimmed before it. Hope was spreading, uncontrolled, and it was weakening the very chains that bound the gods of chaos. The Emperor knew that this could either save mankind or destroy it utterly. His awareness reached across time and space, touching the alien's mind one final time. "You have done what I could not," the Emperor whispered through the warp storm, his voice more thought than sound. But hope is a blade that cuts both ways. Superman heard him, even as the world around him burned. "Then let me be the one to bear the cut," he answered softly. On the edge of the Eye of Terror, The warp itself tore open in fury. From the wound poured legions of demons, greater than any incursion seen since the Horus Heresy. At their head marched the 4 champions of the Chaos Gods, united for the first time, drawn by a single purpose: to destroy the being whose light threatened to starve them. Superman arrived before the Imperium's fleets could even reach the system. The void itself screamed as reality twisted. Time fractured and suns bled crimson fire. He hovered before the maelstrom, his cape fluttering in a wind that did not exist, his eyes burning with determination. "If this is what you fear," he said to the storm, "then I'll face it alone." The battle that followed was beyond comprehension. Worlds shattered under the shockwaves of their clash. Demon princes lunged at him in waves, their forms dissolving into light as his blows struck true. The sky itself seemed to burn as he fought, his every strike a thunderclap of defiance. But the warp fought back, not with strength alone. It attacked his soul. Every fear, every regret, every doubt was dragged from his mind and weaponized against him. He saw visions of his parents dying again, of Lois fading into dust, of himself becoming the very tyrant he despised. The warp tried to make him believe he was no better than the gods he fought. For a moment, even he faltered. Then, from the depths of the storm, a familiar voice echoed Inquisitor Marentha Vale, her ship battered and aflame, broadcasting her voice to all frequencies. "You are not a god," she said, her voice trembling, "but you are what we should have been. Remember who you are." Her words steadied him. The despair that the warp had unleashed turned to defiance. He drew upon the light within, that eternal well of willpower that no darkness could consume. The demons screamed as his aura ignited like a miniature sun. The warp's corruption recoiled. The demonic hosts began to dissolve under the purity of that light. Even the gods themselves felt it. Korn's fury turned to silence. Sinch's laughter froze, Slanesh wept with longing, and Nurgle's joy wilted into sorrow. But the price was unbearable. The warp could not be destroyed, only balanced, and the more he fought, the more it tried to devour him in return. His Kryptonian cells, strained beyond their limits, began to fracture under the metaphysical pressure. His body became translucent, energy bleeding into the void like starlight spilling from a dying sun. He understood then that to save this universe, he could not remain part of it. He rose higher into the storm, his body glowing brighter with every heartbeat. Imperial fleets across the system halted, their soldiers watching in silence as the alien who had defied gods ascended into the burning sky, within the Golden Throne. The Emperor felt something he had not felt in 10,000 years' peace. For a fleeting moment, the psychic torment of the warp lessened, as if humanity's collective pain had been soothed. Superman's light reached Terra itself, and across the Imperium, billions fell to their knees, not in worship, but in awe. There was no command, no sermon, no doctrine. Only light. Then, in a final burst of brilliance, Superman released it all. His body disintegrated into energy, scattering across the warp, merging with it, purifying a part of its chaos into calm. For the first time in millennia, the warp storms quieted. Demons vanished. The eye of terror dimmed. When the light faded, nothing remained of him but silence. Yet something had changed. Across the galaxy, people began to feel a shift deep within, the faint, impossible feeling that the universe no longer hated them. Children born in the following days did not cry in fear but laughter. The psychers who gazed into the warp reported seeing a golden light where once there had only been madness. And within the Emperor's mind, a whisper lingered, not from a god, but from a man. They'll remember what it means to hope. The Dawnborn continued his work in spirit, their faith no longer bound by chains but carried in action. They rebuilt, they healed, and they resisted despair. The Inquisition tried to erase his memory, to purge every mention of the Starborn from the archives. But no matter how many records they destroyed, his mark remained not written in scripture, but carved into hearts. And in the endless darkness of space, where the light of dying suns still glimmered faintly, there were times when a faint red and blue streak could still be seen crossing the stars, reminding those who looked up that somewhere, somehow, the man of tomorrow still watched over the grim darkness of the far future.